Didn't plan to be doing this today, but circumstances require it. Here we are on Friday, the 17th of November. And in barely more than 48 hours, half of the starting quarterbacks in the best division in football are done for the year. We found out on Wednesday morning, Deshaun Watson, Browns quarterback, done with the shoulder injury that he either suffered or aggravated or whatever on Sunday. And now we find out that the wrist injury that Joe Burrow either suffered or aggravated or whatever against the Ravens has knocked him out for the year. The Bengals made that announcement today, just like the Browns. No leak to Shefty, no heads up to any of the folks indirectly on the payroll who work for NFL media, no 5-minute advance notice to anyone, just boom, straight from the team, done for the year. And look, I'm going to say a few things about the injury, about what it means for the Bengals, what it means for the rest of the division. And there's another twist that I want to explain. I was actually in the process of writing this story as we found out about the Burrow injury. I'm going to save that for almost the end. What I'm going to do at the very end is answer some questions that you might have. I put out a call in advance of starting what I guess is kind of a special edition of PFT PM. I don't know what it is. We do it as needed. And this is a moment where it's definitely needed. So the wrist injury last night happened suddenly and quickly, but the question that lingers is whether it was an aggravation of a pre-existing condition. And this all traces to the fact that on Wednesday night, we saw a video posted by the Bengals on social media of Joe Burrow with some sort of a wrap on his hand while they were traveling from Cincinnati to Baltimore. The video was posted and then it was deleted. See, those 5 words are critical to anything we say, anything that's done, any arguments that are made regarding this situation. And then it was deleted. The deletion of the video in and of itself allows a reasonable person to say, well, they had a reason for that. Why would they do it without a reason? And hey, maybe the reason is we didn't like the quality of the video. Maybe the reason is, I don't know, you could see somebody giving the finger in the background. I don't know. But in the absence of an explanation, it is reasonable for the people who saw the video and who know that it was posted and then deleted to say, you know, they're probably trying to hide the fact they had a wrist injury. And that was Wednesday night and into Thursday. Sims and I spent a lot of time talking about that video on Thursday's PFT Live. And I actually got an email from one of our viewers in the UK who was happy we talked about it because he bet big on the Ravens last night. And again, that gets into the whole issue of inside information and who has access to it. And hell, we saw, I didn't know anything. I just saw what everybody else saw. Video posted and then deleted with the wrist wrap. Now, there's a chance he would have been perfectly fine. There's a chance he would have won the game or at least covered the spread. But if he had something that, and I'll use the Mike Ryan term, he's the longtime NFL athletic trainer, and I think certified athletic trainer is the way that they prefer to be identified. He's been with Sunday Night Football for years now. He would always say that an injury needs to quiet down. It's got to quiet down. You know, with the passage of time, with the application of treatment, it gets to the point where it doesn't hurt anymore. At least it doesn't hurt like it did. It doesn't need any type of apparatus to be functional. And maybe this wrist injury, with the aid of treatment and the wearing of whatever that contraption was, quieted down to the point where Joe Burrow could play until the moment that he fell and his hand hit the turf at M&T Bank Stadium. Then after that, he can't throw. The touchdown pass he threw to Joe Mixon didn't have a whole lot on it. And then we saw the video on the sideline where he tries to throw a pass and you can see he just aborts, and he knows that wrist is messed up. So, but for that video, but for what we saw Wednesday night, no one would be saying anything about the possibility that it was an existing injury. Why? Because they didn't identify in the injury report that he had an existing injury. That's the whole purpose of the injury report. We know who's injured. We know how injured they are in a loose sort of way. Fully participated in practice, limited in practice, questionable, doubtful, out, whatever. It doesn't give us any clear indication of how healthy someone is. And there's an incentive by the teams, I would submit, to keep it as secret and vague and general as possible. We've seen that for years. Teams have done that for years. They keep it vague, they keep it general, and there continues to be lurking throughout the NFL this idea that, and I've heard former players couch it this way, you need to test that ankle. You need to test that knee. Well, if you don't know about the injury, there's nothing to test. And I'm not saying someone deliberately injures someone else, that they do it, that they should do it, that they could do it. All I'm saying is these teams are keeping it hidden and downplaying it for a reason. There's a reason the Eagles never listed Jalen Hurts as having a knee injury when everybody knew he had a knee injury. Everybody knew it. They put a brace on the damn thing during a game, and they still didn't list it as a knee injury in any injury report at all this year. So, and by the way, we raised the issue with the league about the Jaguars saying Trevor Lawrence's knee's still bothering him. Well, why isn't he on the injury report? The Jaguars addressed the situation by putting him on the injury report. So Burrow wasn't. He got injured. He's out for the year. And I listened to the tail end of Zach Taylor's press conference, and the coach of the Bengals said that it's Jake Browning. Jake Browning got a lot of work in preseason and in training camp because of Burrow's calf injury. So Browning's good to go, and he wasn't horrible last night. Thrust into service. He wasn't horrible. It wasn't a train wreck. It wasn't a debacle. Now he's got a few extra days to get ready for the Steelers. Boy, how lucky the Steelers are. This really is shamrock up the butt, as Sims would say, plus horseshoe up the butt, as Sims would say. It gets crowded up there, as I would say. Steelers go to Cleveland this week, and they don't see Deshaun Watson. They go to Cincinnati the next week, and they don't see Joe Burrow. I was trying to remember, is that home or away? It's away because it's December 23rd on NBC that it's Cincinnati at Pittsburgh. So 2 games in Ohio, 2 backup quarterbacks, and the Steelers have a chance to be 8-3 through the end of November. Maybe the Bengals will look for somebody else to add to the depth chart. Joe Flacco working out for the Browns today. Maybe he'll work out for the Bengals. Maybe they'll find somebody else. Maybe Matt Ryan's phone finally rings. I don't know. But regardless, they won't have one of the great quarterbacks in the NFL, and it changes the vibe in the AFC. A week ago, we're looking at the Bengals at 5-3, and we're saying, here they come. And they keep going. And hey, they could end up with the 1 seed. They may not lose another game. They'd be 14-3 by the time it's all said and done. And between Sunday, when they lost at home to the Texans, and last night, the loss of Burrow for the season, and put a fork in the Bengals. I mean, really, they're in 4th place in the division, and they're going to stay in 4th place most likely. They're not going to make the playoffs, barring something that would be worthy of its own 30 for 30. I said that about the Bills this week. If the Bills somehow go from 5-5 to the playoffs, when you consider they play the Eagles and the Chiefs and the Cowboys and the Dolphins, if they somehow get to the postseason, that in and of itself is worthy of a documentary. The Bengals are in the same boat. And, oh, by the way, they play the Chiefs on New Year's Eve, that game. Probably going to get flexed out of the 4:25 p.m. Eastern slot on New Year's Eve. Unless, of course, the Bengals have a Vikings with Josh Dobbs type of experience with Jake Browning as the quarterback. So we'll see how that all plays out. All right. What I want to say about the injury reporting angle, because people are confused about why I care about the injury report. And this is not hall monitor stuff. This is a desire to ensure that we don't have some sort of major betting scandal that will transform the way the NFL is governed. The NFL prefers to govern its own business. And while it's far from perfect, it may be better than if there was some federal agency out there that had oversight responsibilities for the NFL, for other professional sports. And I don't care about the other sports. All I care about is the NFL. I don't want some federal agency that can mess with the way the NFL does business. Although, frankly, maybe it would improve things. I don't know. But that's one way. When I say Congress could get involved, you're like, oh, you're an idiot. Well, number one, I am an idiot. But number two, Congress could still get involved. It could. You know, the ongoing urgency to promote player health and safety. You understand that all traces back to October 28 of 2009. That was the day Commissioner Roger Goodell and former NFLPA Executive Director Morris Smith were hauled to Congress to explain to a committee why they hadn't done jack diddly squat to protect players from head trauma. And the message from the hearing was, you clean up your mess or we're going to clean it up for you. And we'll give you the chance to clean it up on your own. And if you don't, we're going to do it and you're not going to like the way we do it. And what happened after that? One after another. Safety, 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 safety. Initially, it was head trauma. And then as they did more and more to protect players' heads, players started to say, well, you don't care about knees? You don't care about ankles? You don't care about defensive players? And we've seen year after year, almost every year, there's another safety-related change. The most significant of which, the 2018 change out of the blue. Out of the blue. I remember sitting there at the hotel in Orlando, I believe it was. So much for remembering it, but I think it was Orlando. We're at our desk in the middle of interviewing guests. Chris was there, and they bring out a piece of paper that has new rule, whatever the number was, proposal number 11, I think it was. It's illegal to lower your helmet and initiate contact with an opponent, 15-yard penalty. It's like, what the hell is this? Nobody told us this was under consideration. Nobody told us it was being proposed. And boom, they just cram it through. And look at how vague it's been, lowering the helmet to initiate contact. But again, it's all about safety, and it's all about Congress scaring the NFL straight October 28 of 2009. The same thing can happen when it comes to gambling because it's legal now. See, that's the problem with the legalization of gambling. Before it's legalized, and I think back to, and there's a chapter in Playmakers about this, there was a game between the Chargers and the Steelers in November of 2008. Steelers were ahead. There was what should have been a pick six, a Troy Polamalu touchdown, that was erroneously wiped off the board. What that did, it prevented the Steelers from covering the spread. And millions changed hands through illegal wagering. Well, if something like that happens at a time when gambling is legalized and an officiating error that is admitted by the official, it was Scott Green, who was the referee of that game and made the mistake, you admit that, and you've got millions, and it would be tens of millions now that change hands between Steelers cover and Steelers don't. It's a problem because this is hard-earned American taxpayer money that is being utilized and directed to a system of wagering that has flaws, and those flaws need to be fixed. Now, when it comes to the injury report, the idea is we want everyone to have equal access to the information about who's hurt and who's not. The problem is situations like Hurts and Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow tell us that there is inside information out there, and there's an imbalance. 99% of the people or more don't know the truth, and the small percent who do can misappropriate that information. They can rig the bets in their favor. Now, that's just part of the problem. The other problem is, and this is where it can get very expensive for the NFL, regardless of whether Congress ever does anything, regardless of whether there's ever a prosecution, all it takes is one disgruntled bettor and one motivated lawyer, and you slap them together and you get a class action filed against the Bengals and the NFL. And the argument against the Bengals would be fraud or intentional/negligent misrepresentation, concealing the true status of Joe Burrow and inducing me as a bettor to believe the Bengals are going to win, to take the 3.5 points. If I don't know the truth about Joe Burrow, I take the Bengals. If I know the truth about Joe Burrow, I don't take the Bengals. Now, I don't know that a class action could be certified on that basis because you'd have to prove that each and every bettor was motivated by believing Joe Burrow was healthy. But I'd say for the quarterback, the starting quarterback, not being on the injury report when he's got this wrist wrap that becomes a season-ending wrist injury in the very next game, I think that reliance is implied. I'm not betting on the Bengals if I know that the starting quarterback's wrist is jacked up. So that's the kind of problem the NFL is facing, and that's why I don't buy the claim by Zach Taylor that the wrist wrap was completely unrelated to the injury, because he has to say that. And I'm not going to buy the end result of the NFL's investigation because they're going to get a ticket to the litigation party as well, because the argument will be that they negligently enforce their own injury report rules, that they allow this atmosphere of non-compliance to exist. So the teams are just like, screw it. We don't want the Ravens to know Joe Burrow is injured. This is a critical game. We lose this game, we're done. They don't need to know he's injured. We don't want them testing his wrist. We don't want them shoving him to the ground and hoping that in the process of bracing his fall, he aggravates the wrist injury. We don't need them to know any of that. And again, I'm not suggesting anyone intentionally tries to hurt anyone, but there's a lot riding on these games. And back in the 70s, the quote from Al Davis was, the other team's quarterback must go down. He must go down hard. And it wasn't just because they want to inflict pain or they enjoy hitting quarterbacks. They understand the value of putting the quarterback out of the game. That was everything that flowed from Bountygate, from Kurt Warner when he was with the Cardinals and the Saints won that game, and then Brett Favre with the Vikings when the Saints won that game. We're playing for a Super Bowl, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And if we knock the other quarterback out of the game, we're more likely to win. So when you flip it around, why would a team lie? Why would a team hide it? Because they don't want anybody getting any ideas. They don't want anybody having any temptation to try to test the wrist. It's better if we just don't tell anyone about it. So they didn't. And there'll be a year at least, statute of limitations, for someone somewhere in one of the states where gambling is legal to file either an individual lawsuit or a class action. And the money is in the class action. Because think of it this way. If I bet $100 on the Bengals and I just want to sue the Bengals to get my $100 back, well, it's a $100 lawsuit. If I'm the lawyer and I'm representing the class of everyone nationwide who bet on the Bengals, I don't need to do the math to tell you that's a shitload of money. And that's the incentive. And all it takes is one individual person who decides, you know what, I'm going to do it. This guy came to my office, or I know a guy who gambles, and I called him up and he said he bet on the Bengals, and I got him sufficiently worked up into a frenzy that he's ready to file this lawsuit. Let's go do it. Let's go do it. And it would affect positive change if it happens. That's why class actions are favored in the law. The idea that you take a small indignity that in and of itself isn't worth pursuing. Hey, I got screwed out of $100. Well, nobody's going to sue over $100. But if 100,000 people got screwed out of $100 and you make it a class action, that's how you make companies accountable who are playing fast and loose with the rules. And the Bengals, at a minimum, the circumstances demand an investigation as to whether or not they were playing fast and loose with the rules. And the NFL is incentivized to whitewash it because they face this potential argument that they were negligent in their enforcement of their own rules. So I expect the NFL's end result to be nothing to see here. Whatever it takes, nothing to see here. And then if the truth is ever going to come out, it's going to come out within the context of a lawsuit, if a lawsuit is ever filed. All right. Let me answer a couple of these questions and wrap this up. Brendan Panikar, Ryan Tannehill to the Bengals. We talked about this in the context of the Browns. Ryan Tannehill's under contract with the Titans. Titans would have to release him. He'd have to pass through waivers. The Bengals would have a chance to make a waivers claim. Other teams would as well. He's due to make $12 million more for the balance of the season. As of today, by next week, it would be a little bit lower. Why would anybody take on the balance of that contract? What's in it for the Titans to let him go? Because if he goes unclaimed, they got to pay him the balance of the money anyway. May as well keep him around. You never know when you're going to need him. The one way to make this happen, Bengals make the phone call to the Titans discreetly, multiple levels down, buzz burner phone to burner phone, and you say, if you let him go, we'll claim him on waivers, and you're off the hook for anything you might owe him. And then the Bengals get Ryan Tannehill. It sounds like they're going with Jake Browning, but you know they may explore their options. They got all weekend to see what they may do. But whether it's Ryan Tannehill or Jimmy Garoppolo, that's the way you could make it work. It would violate the rules, but it's a way to maybe get one of those guys to be released, and then you claim him on waivers. And you have higher priority than the Browns right now, so you don't have to worry about them claiming Tannehill or Garoppolo if they end up being injured. Dr. J 144, I read in the past, each designation is 25% more likely for the player to go. Probable 75, questionable 50, etc. Does the NFL track injury reports to make sure the designations teams give are accurate? For example, if 80% of questionable players actually play, that's bad. Well, here's what happened. Several years ago, they got rid of probable, and people thought probable meant 75%. What it meant was there's a virtual certainty the player will be available for normal duty, which meant you're playing. you're playing. And every once in a while, there would be a situation where a player was probable and didn't play. And there were tough questions to answer when that happened. That happened with Mike Vick once in the NFL Investigated. Can't remember what they did. I think it also happened with the running back who played for the Packers, Amon Green. He may have been with the Texans at the time. I vaguely recall that happening. The way it is now, questionable is anything under 100% all the way to 50. Doubtful is 49-1, and out is 0. I think a lot of the guys who are listed as questionable are actually doubtful. Pretty much every week you see a player listed as questionable on a team that travels that weekend. Not doubtful, listed as questionable. Higher than 50% likelihood of playing. Then when it's time to go get on the plane, player's downgraded to out because the player's not going on the road trip and the player was never going on the road trip. That's one of the subtle ways that teams manipulate the injury reports, and they do it because the NFL never does anything about it. So I hope I answered your question. If I didn't, oh well. On to the next one. Nick DePanfilis. Can Burrow recover fully? Hope he's not injury prone. That would be a real shame. Well, I don't know if he can recover fully because we just don't know what it all entails within the mechanism of the wrist. I mean, the hand looked kind of funky and swollen, but apparently it's a wrist thing, and there's all sorts of stuff in the wrist, and you do a lot with, when you're throwing the ball, the wrist is kind of important. So I think it's TBD, and it's good for him that he got his long-term contract and the injury guarantees that go along with it. It's not good for the Bengals because they're on the hook for that money, even if he would never play again. Millions go from the Bengals to Burrow, and millions count against the salary cap going forward. Tyler Z, is the coaching staff for Cincinnati going to get in trouble anyway, or in any way, for neglecting to put Burrow on the injury report? We'll see. But I don't think the NFL is going to do it because I don't think the NFL wants the heat that comes from admitting that we got a bunch of cheaters in here. I think the NFL typically likes to avoid having to say to anyone, hey, look over here. Hey, everybody, check this out. We got corrupt organizations. I don't think they like that. Sambivalent01, do you think the issue with lack of good backup quarterbacks is that teams are recycling, moving on too quickly with draft picks rather than having someone develop in the quarterback room for a few years? I think that's part of it. Guys washing out. Trey Lance, gone, done. Now he's in Dallas. But look at what happened with Geno Smith. Guys need reps. Guys need chances. We have a bunch of little-known guys on the second and third string of depth charts. And as I said earlier today on PFT Live, the idea that teams just don't prioritize it, it's the old Tom Moore line, that if we don't have Peyton Manning, we're F-KED anyway, we're not going to practice that way. So you just go forward with all your eggs in that starting quarterback basket, and if that basket breaks, oh well, that's that. Maybe next year. Donnie wants to know, why do you hate the NFL? I love getting that question because I love being able to say, I don't hate the NFL. I love the NFL. I've been a fan of the NFL since I was 7 or 8 years old. But I will hold the stewards of the sport accountable when they do things they shouldn't. And I blame it on NFL films. You put this whole thing on a pedestal. I say this all the time. They put it up on a pedestal with John Facenda in slow motion, and I expect the league to act that way. I expect the stewards of the sport to give a crap. I expect them to do the best they can to avoid controversies, to understand how things could happen in a way that's bad for the game. I love the game. I reserve the right to point a finger and chastise those responsible for the game because I think it's a solemn obligation. And why would you not, if you love football and if you love the NFL, why would you not be willing to stand up and say the people currently in charge of the sport aren't doing a good enough job? That shows how much you love it, Donnie KL. Donnie KL. Take that, Donnie KL. All right, what else do we have? We have a less artful question about the Bengals' potential responsibility for failing to disclose Burrow on the injury report. I don't want to have them need to bleep any more things than I've already said. Let's just call it. I didn't expect to talk this long. I didn't expect to be doing anything on camera this Friday afternoon, but circumstances commanded it. Thanks for some of your time. We will see you Monday for PFT Live. I was going to say next Wednesday for PFT PM, but next Wednesday is the screwy week. I'm doing the Black Friday PFT PM. Wednesday is the Joint Picks podcast. And also Sunday night, please tune in. Come on, 7 o'clock Eastern, NBC, Football Night in America, Vikings, Broncos. A lot of you complained when it wasn't flexed. You ain't complaining now. It's going to be a good game. Josh Dobbs, Russell Wilson. I wish it was going to snow a little bit in Denver. It's not in the forecast, but a good game should be. Thanks as always for some of your time. We'll talk to you soon. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.